Man, it feels good to be living eternally. I'm forgiven without a care in the world. Just catch me coasting and dipping, catch me moving around. I love exploring this world, in and out of my town.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Dat Post Mill Podcast, where my lame, senseless humor is about to be shown how horrible it is by the great mind behind Presbyterian memes tonight. Woo! We got Paul Barth on here.
How's
hey, Paul.
It going? Hi.
How you doing? I don't know if everybody knows this, but the brilliant mind of Presbyterian memes comes from Paul Barth. He hails from Texas, right?
Yes.
The country of Texas. Where in Texas are you from?
Well, I'm not from Texas, but I'm living in College Station right now, going to Texas A&M. So.
Okay. What are you going to school for?
I'm going to school for Geographic Information Science and Technology, which is basically like, if you've ever played with Google Earth, it's kind of like a sophisticated, there's lots of sophisticated programs like that you make maps with and plot stuff, crunch data, stuff like that.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
What kind of job are you looking to get into? You want to work for Google?
Well, right now I have an internship in Houston in the oil and gas industry. So in all the, you can imagine how much land they keep track of. And I'm basically keeping track of all the land, the leases, the mineral rights, the property rights, stuff like that. It's pretty fun. So that's what I want to do.
And how did you get into that sort of stuff?
Well, I was in the Air Force, and I was a geospatial intelligence analyst, which is a fancy word for someone who looks at pictures, satellite pictures and high altitude pictures. And I watched the Predator and Reaper drone video feed. So I got interested in, it's called GIS, Geographic Information Science, and satellite imagery. And so when I was getting out of the military, I wanted to find a place where I could, I didn't want to work for the government anymore. So I looked for where the private industry is doing that kind of stuff, and the biggest thing was oil and gas. So then I found Texas A&M, which is close to Houston, where the center of all that is, and enrolled there and stuff like that. So
cool. I definitely want to hear more about your transition out of working for the government and why and all that. But let's
okay.
How about we just say everybody who's on the show, because we got some people who are on here. So I'm Dustin Raynham.
Colin Pearson.
Shaney Adiemi.
Oh, that's how you say it.
I didn't know that's how you said it.
So it's one word. Shaney Adiemi.
Adam said, "Tell them I've got a fever, and the only prescription is more theonomy."
And it looks like John lost power, so I'm assuming he needs some more power from the spirits. We need to pray some Benny Hinn anointing on him to get him going again for next week.
Are you gonna pray that God opens the floodgates of heaven and rains down fire?
Yeah.
Because every time,
literally,
man.
Fire.
I can't remember where I first saw the meme, but there was a picture of like some church that looked like something that was on fire hit it like from above, and it said because Ren Collective Experiment told me to, or something like that. Anyway, so Paul, where do you get your extraordinary sense of humor? Because I'm pretty sure at least 90% of the time you post a meme from Presbyterian memes page, I literally laugh out loud. It's always hilarious.
Literally, yes. They're amazing.
I don't know. I try. Sometimes I try to think of something that would just make people mad.
Sometimes.
So, tell us about the brilliant video you posted with the.
Yeah, that was not my idea, but
really, who could be the genius behind that one?
Yeah, somebody. What's that even from?
It's from a show called Gundam Wing.
Okay.
It used to play on Cartoon Network.
Okay. I watched Dragon Ball Z a little bit, but I didn't watch that show.
Dragon Ball Z is OG.
Yeah. I used to train in my backyard, in case Frieza came down and I could fight him.
Nice. So you obviously you come up with these memes. I'm assuming maybe some people suggest things to you every once in a while, but are they all just things that they just come to you? You see a meme and you think of a good Presby version of it?
A lot of times I try to think of a sarcastic way to make a theological point that I think is an important point to make that you don't see often, like on other meme pages, for instance, or listening to sermons, you get ideas. And eventually, it's kind of weird now. Every time I see something, I think, how could that be made into a meme? It's kind of a...
takes over your life, everything
kind
you see.
of a weird thought process, but yeah, we get submissions from people, and my wife actually has made a lot of them, or it was her idea at least, so she's got a good sense of humor.
So is she really the brains behind the operation, or?
Yeah, she's made some of them. So
what did you do for your creative outlet before this then?
Oh man,
because I can just tell this is just pent up inside your head, needs to come out.
Yeah, I don't know. In the military, sense of humor was easy to do without getting in trouble. So after I got out of the military, I didn't have a way of expressing that. So then, I don't know, I feel like the memes kind of do that.
They're addictive. It's like, seriously. Once you start doing them, you're just like, I mean, I'm sure we all have probably the app on our phone to just make them. We have all our stock images saved, our custom ones, and yeah. Mm-hmm. I made one just yesterday. My sister's boyfriend he farms and he's got some animals that he's selling. He's got a pig, and it's like you don't even think about it. It's just they just come to you when someone's talking about, oh yeah, if you want like a fourth of a pig, that you get it cut it up into like, pork chops and this and that and bacon. And I was like, there's like one pig left and you're trying to divvy it up. And I wanted to be like, can I just have all the bacon? And I'm like instantly like, oh, perfect. So I went and downloaded a picture of bacon, erased the color behind it. So it was just bacon, put that on top of the little dude holding the match. And I was like, how much for all the bacon? It's just things like that where you just, every sentence that you speak, you're like, that could be a meme. Quick, let me make it real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but yeah, my mind thinks of how it could be made a meme.
In 10 years, people are going to look back and be like, what? Like, they just spoke in memes. Like,
yeah.
Seriously. Have conversations just with pictures.
Especially on the eschatology debate group, because all of the admins have such a ridiculous sense of humor. 9 times out of 10, any discussion turns into a comment photo war. And, yeah. You used to be in the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what did you do with the military?
Well, first I actually wanted to be a cop, so that's a whole nother... I don't know if me and Colin would be friends if that ever happened. But yeah, and I actually got pretty far through in Las Vegas the recruitment process, but I don't know. Then I changed my mind and wanted to be in the military. And
were you married at the time?
No. Well, I got married like a month before I left for the military. I know the Bible says longer period of time than that, but I didn't know that at the time, and it kind of was a bad idea, but because it sucked being in basic training as a newlywed and not seeing your wife, but yeah, the recruiter just told me, oh, do you want to look at satellite photos? I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So yeah, when I was doing that in the military, I liked it a lot, but that was around a couple years into the military. I was slowly introduced to theonomy, and I actually read 2 of Joel McDermott's books, Restoring America, One County at a Time, and then the Bible and War in America. That was like an expansion of the military chapter in that book. And that really kind of convicted me that I was supporting unjust wars mostly. So I felt like I needed to not stay in. So I let my contract expire, my enlistment expire, and started looking for what I could do to get out, That was the motivation behind not wanting to stay in. But even before I believed like that, I didn't really plan on making a career out of it either.
Well, how long were you in?
Just 4 years.
So did you talk to your the fellow men when you're out there about, your convictions and why you're leaving, or was that something that just kind of let it kind of fade away and just left?
A little bit. I was pretty well known as the Christian guy,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes let my brash sense of humor be focused toward that. Like, I don't know, being upfront with people about sin and the gospel and stuff, but in an upfront way, but not in a flippant way either. I think some people respected me for that, but even though they didn't agree with me, and then other people really didn't like me.
So tell us about how did you come to Reformed theology and theonomy and other things like that?
Okay. Yeah, well, I grew up actually like in a Foursquare charismatic church, and then my family left when I was like 13 or so, and we went to just a regular Baptist church. So I was always raised Arminian, charismatic. Even in high school, I would go to just any youth group in town that had cool, fun events,
Oh yeah.
And I played bass in like a couple rock and roll worship bands at the hip churches and stuff like that, But then some friends I met at this church. Do you guys remember that clip that was going around Facebook for a while of those two pastors that were gonna like nail the final nail in the coffin of Calvinism, and they were showing pictures of babies saying Calvinists believe babies go to hell and all this stuff?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In Bakersfield or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had a sister church in Las Vegas, and that's where I went.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and actually, you could tell that Calvinism was not liked there. So a couple people were kind of pushed out because of that. Actually, Paul Washer videos started circling around in the college group at that church. And so that kind of piqued my interest because it seemed like genuine theology that I always looked for, but could hardly find in circles like that. So, it was kind of like a mass group of us were introduced to, the 5 points of Calvinism all at the same time. So a bunch of us became Calvinists and left that church. And then, one of my friends found a Reformed Baptist church in town. And he said, dude, I found a Calvinist church in town. I'm like, yeah, right. There's no such thing. I didn't think that they were really, I thought that was just an obscure doctrine that not many people held to, So I was a Reformed Baptist for a while. And then, just growing in theologically reading things, and, I listened to Mark Driscoll and people like that at first, and then started listening more to more legit people like R.C. Sproul and stuff like that. And the more I learned and read, the more I was like, okay, there's another option. You can be a Paedo-Baptist. Wonder what that's all about. So I was reading about that and just studying covenant theology. And when my wife got pregnant was when I really started to think about it more seriously, because, when you're a single person, it doesn't impact you as much as if you have kids.
Right.
Even though it's important, either way. But, yeah, so it took me a while of studying it, just going back and forth on it, and then I finally became convinced of covenant baptism. So we had our son baptized when he was about a year and a half old. So it took me 9 months plus a year and a half before I finally nailed it down. And then we were going to a 1689 Reformed Baptist church in Hawaii where I was stationed in the Air Force, and the pastors worked with me to find an OPC pastor in town who agreed to baptize my son. And so we got him baptized, and then shortly after that I moved. So then when I moved here to Texas, I joined a PCA here. So that's a general background of my walk. Raised Christian. I never did all the drugs or don't have a huge conversion story, but.
So you were saved from a life of drugs and alcohol at an early age?
Yeah. So, where was your wife in all of this? Like, did she have similar Christian background? Did she, as you kind of learned things, did she just kind of agree and kind of go along with it, or was there any pushback?
Yeah, well, when I met her, she was an independent fundamentalist Baptist, KJV onlyist, Arminian. And
So did you go to Steve Anderson's church?
basically, like, that is how she grew up. I don't know. She was kind of burned by that church. When I met her, when we were dating, we went to Bible studies and stuff like that, and I was talking to her about Calvinism, and I think she thought I was crazy at first for a while, but I basically missionary dated her into being a Calvinist, so I wouldn't recommend that approach, but it worked in God's providence. So
Doug Wilson says that I think it was on an Ask Doug saying, is it okay for a Presbyterian to date a Baptist or something? And he said, well, I wouldn't recommend it, but it would be better for a Presbyterian guy to date a Baptist girl than the other way around. So he doesn't recommend the Baptist women or the Reformed women to date the Baptist men. So you didn't do all
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Yeah.
Poor John. Poor John.
I know. Cool. That's cool. So she kind of is it like, should she follow her lead? Because that's kind of what it is, like with my wife, where she's not as interested in reading theological books and things. So it's more, hey, this is kind of what I believe now. Let's talk through it. And usually it's like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I introduced her to Calvinism, and then, after we were married, when I was looking into covenant theology and paedobaptism, she kind of just trusted me to learn about it and make the right decision. She didn't, and she went along with it pretty easily. So, but then one thing though, she actually convinced me of head coverings. She studied that issue herself because she just felt like it's something as a woman she should look into. And so she did. And then at first I was just cool with her doing what she felt convicted to do. But then after talking with her a little bit and reading about it myself, she pretty much convinced me of it. So that was pretty cool that it worked the other way around for that,
That's cool. I definitely get challenged too from my wife sometimes on things where she's like, remember so-and-so mentioned that one, like whatever, some specific doctrine, we were kind of looking into it. Like, I really think we should look into that more. I was like, oh yeah, I know we should.
She's also my filter. There's a lot of stuff that I would say or do that would not be good that she stops me from doing. So
I'm an ENTP, so I'm a debater. So if I were as many Facebook groups I'm in right now, if I were not married, yeah, it would be bad.
Yeah,
it would not be good. I would not be an admin of the pub if I were not married.
So Shaney, do you have any questions for Paul? You've been rather quiet.
Paul?
were you the one that made that?
Oh, the
You
Paul
know what
Blart,
I'm talking about.
the Paul Blart meme. No, I didn't make that.
That was awesome.
That was Nick.
That was pretty awesome.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah, so he made a meme that was from the Paul. I'm gonna get it. Is it Blarth? Is the movie
Paul Blart Mall Cop?
the mall cop? So they put Paul's face on it and called it the Presby Cop. It's pretty awesome.
I'm like driving home and I'm like, why is my phone blowing up right now? I can't even check it.
Oh, that was so good.
I think in the description for this episode on our website, we should put like the top five Presbyterian memes, and we'll put links to them in the description. I think that'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. And also for those who don't know, we Presbyterian Memes has a Twitter account, and there's a ton of people on there that are loving all the posts. So if you're not as active on Facebook and you are on Twitter, I think it's just Presby Memes, Presby memes. So you're taking over the internets here. Are there a lot of other Reformed or Calvinistic meme Facebook? They're usually just Facebook pages, right?
Yeah, usually, I think. I know of a couple. but they're not as funny, so.
Shots fired.
Take that, Matthew Wilkins.
Oh.
Which one does he do?
Reform memes daily.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That page is pretty old, and near the beginning they had a lot of funny stuff, and I think they're sort of, running low on content, but...
They've actually reposted a lot of my personal memes from my page without giving credit also.
Man.
Uh-oh.
Matthew Wilkins.
Uh-oh. We're gonna have to call someone's pastor here.
Shaney, if they're good, you gotta feed them to me, man.
Paul, how many do you have saved up waiting to be posted? Or are you doing them daily?
Oh, man. Yeah, I just have a folder with, I don't even know. I haven't checked in a while. Let me check. Probably like 500 or so. Yeah. And then I have a folder of templates, I just call it, where it's a picture that I thought was funny that I want to figure out something for. So I have a lot of ideas that I haven't done anything with yet. And then I have like a note thing on my phone of ideas that I get.
So pretty much if you're one a day, you got at least a year and a half ahead of you.
Yeah, I think so.
How many do you post every day?
I just post one. And then on Lord's Days, I try to post something that's just like a good theological quote, but not necessarily funny or...
No snark on the Lord's Day.
Yeah, but those are actually, well, they're not too hard to come across. Mostly those I repost that other people make. I've only made a few of those.
So you're good at being funny but not being serious?
Yeah, pretty much. But no, yeah, if anyone wants to send me a good Presbyterian quote for those, I'll make it.
So how many do you think you make a day?
Well, sometimes I have spurts where I'll make 10 and then I won't make any.
Did you, I'm coming from a digital marketer. I'm thinking about like strategy and everything. So when you come up with like a really good one that's relevant, will you bump that one up in the queue to get it out right away, or?
Yeah. Or if I think that Reform Memes Daily is going to post it.
I remember you were real quick with when the Star Wars trailer came out, the Chewie We're Home.
Oh yeah.
Did you beat him, or was it pretty close?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, no, I was like, what was it? I watched the trailer, and I was just like, what memes can I make off this? Because I know it's going to be huge, so I just made the first thing that came to my mind and posted it half an hour later. So, and then I did that for Batman too, but nobody cares about Batman.
That one was still pretty funny though. That was pretty funny.
What was are you the Dat Postma one?
No, it was Do You Baptize Babies? You will.
That's right. Yeah.
What was the Star Wars one?
It was when Chewie and Han walk into the Millennium Falcon, and he says, "Chewie, we're home." So I just put, when you walk into church on the Lord's Day, Chewie, we're home.
I think the Brian Williams memes were the best.
There were so many of them, but every single one.
Seriously, so good.
I was just thinking, any biblical or theological event that I could put him in, obviously that didn't have an image of Jesus in it, but...
So there we were, standing before Pharaoh.
Yeah, in the lion's den, or reporting live from Noah's flood, I found a picture of him in a raincoat.
Yeah. Was it the lion's den where he was like referencing the lions like biting him or almost biting or something that was,
and then a lion almost bit me.
Yeah, something like that. Just, oh my gosh, I cracked up.
Yeah.
There I was. Oh man, so good.
Yeah. And then just him walking out of the parting of the Red Sea with no words, just him walking out of there.
That's good. And then, so did you come up with the original evolution of the Reformation, or did you just start tweaking it, or? Some
Baptists came up with that, and they put, Roman Catholic, Anglican, Presbyterian, Reformed Baptist. Like Reformed Baptist is somehow Semper Reformanda, So I was like, that is offensive. So I had to change it.
So then you put the Presbyterian in front of him with a beer and a pipe.
No, he took Reformed Baptist out of the lineup.
Yeah. I just took them completely out.
Anabaptist dodo bird.
Yeah. That was actually not my idea, the dodo bird part. That you guys know Michael Daniels?
Yes, yeah.
That was his idea.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And then someone commented on how he was still naked, so I had to draw a suit on him.
Did you draw that then, or do you do like Photoshop work yourself, or?
Yeah, I use GIMP.
So, Paul, is it true that you're a Covenanter?
I might not fit 100% into that, but in a way I'd call myself one, yeah.
Because you know Shaney is the first ever Baptist Covenanter, right?
No, that's just a joke that we make because he hasn't come out and said that he's a Presbyterian yet, but I'm pretty sure that he's working on his 50-page refutation of everything that his elder, Dr. James White, has ever written on the subject.
Oh, yes. That's going to take a lot of work.
He just muted and walked away.
Yeah, Shaney just muted and stepped out of the room.
He's like, I'm out of here. I can't handle this.
Plausible deniability.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, you guys, what were you talking about?
Oh, I missed that. I can't imagine what it would be like to have James White as an elder pastor. That would be, especially if you disagreed with him theologically. I mean, hey, you want to go for coffee and chat about, baptism? I mean,
I won't tell the story because I don't know if Shaney would want me to tell the story, but something similar to that actually happened. So how did you come to those conclusions? Because you started with theonomy by reading Joel McDurmon. So you were introduced to it through Christian Reconstruction.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was just one group just on Facebook, Theonomists, I think that Pittman runs, and there was a big debate in there between Covenanters and Reconstructionists, and I didn't know what either one of those things were at the time. But I was just reading the debates, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting debate, I agreed with the Reconstructionists more, but I liked that the Covenanters had a lot of history behind what they were saying. So then they both split up and started their own Facebook groups. So now you have 3 theonomy groups. Yeah. So I joined all 3 and was just, reading and following along, and any books or resources or sermons that they posted, I would listen. Yeah, I just slowly started. The more I learned, the more I realized that I agreed with the Covenanter side of things more. Not just in terms of theonomy, but also in terms of confessionalism and theology proper, too. Which I know there's a wide variety of Reconstructionists, so there's some confessional guys,
So why don't we start with what are the main differences between Covenanter and Christian Reconstruction?
Okay.
Or maybe even start just throw some names out. Who are some famous people that are on either side?
So the big name Christian Reconstructionists, I think the movement sort of started with, in a sense, Van Til. He wasn't a Reconstructionist, but his philosophy laid the groundwork for what later developed into Reconstructionism. Rushdoony was the first one, his Institutes of Biblical Law. And then after him, Gary North and Greg Bahnsen are the other 2 really big names. And there's a handful now out there like Gary DeMar and Joel McDurmon. And I'm trying to think if there's other big names out there still today. Gary North is still writing, so those are the
Joe
big
Morecraft.
That's right, Joe Morecraft. And Joe Morecraft is another. He tends to be sort of run kind of the line a little bit because he's a little bit more confessional. Yeah.
His denomination was one of the first to say something against federal vision too, I think. So
what was his denomination?
RPCUS, I think, maybe. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I think they were they're definitely the first people in the Reconstructionist camps to ever say anything against federal vision, so.
John Weaver, is he Reconstructionist too, or is he?
I would call him one. He's a Baptist, but I would classify him as Reconstructionist. He's got some pretty good sermons.
Yeah, Joe Morecraft's sermon series on Deuteronomy is really good, actually. I just listened through that. It was pretty good. So you were going to say about Covenanters.
Yeah, so Carlos wrote an article on my blog with 7 differences between Covenanters and Reconstructionists. and it's pretty good. It outlines the main differences, even though there's variations within both camps. But the 7 points he put are national covenanting. It's the first one. I guess I can briefly describe what each of them are as I go through. National covenanting is basically where, after the gospel goes forth in a nation, the nation as a whole repents. They basically swear a covenant to God to be a Christian nation and that they'll follow God's laws. And that kind of leads into the second point, which is the establishment principle. And that's those national covenanting and the establishment principle kind of go hand in hand. Covenanting is more on the church side of things, and I would say establishment principle is more on the state side. That's where the civil magistrate establishes the church
as the official religion of a country.
Yeah, exactly.
Like under Constantine or Scotland with was it with the Solemn League and Covenant? Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm. Solemn League and Covenant. The Solemn League and Covenant was Scotland, Ireland, and England. The National Covenant was Scotland's covenant before that the Solemn League and Covenant was kind of based on. But yeah, that's basically the outworking of a revival that took place.
So how is that different from Reconstructionists? Would Reconstructionists just not really talk about that at all, or would they look at that reality differently?
I never even heard of covenanting until the Covenanters talked about it, you know. Reconstructionists would probably say that the nation should be Christian, but more in a general sense, and they'd probably be more open to different types of Christian groups and denominations. Yeah, they'd be more ecumenical. I'm going to probably equate a lot of stuff back to the 1640s in England, just because I think that's a good reference. So like the Covenanters were the Scottish people who wanted to establish the Presbyterian Church as the church of the United Kingdom. Then when Cromwell took over, he was more like a Reconstructionist, I would say. He was an independent, so he didn't believe in Presbyterian church government. He believed in
Congregationalism?
Yeah, Congregationalism. And he was a little more lenient, like, as long as you were an Orthodox Christian, you were okay. He did not approve of Roman Catholics or straight-up heretics, though. So he wasn't... Some people might go further left than even Cromwell on that point.
So Cromwell was establishmentarian, but not Presbyterian church government, is that right?
Yeah. I don't know too much. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but I listened to a couple sermon series about the history of that time. It's pretty complex. There's a lot of different things going on, so there's lots of different reasons why people did what they did too.
Okay, so national covenanting and establishmentarianism. And am I correct in saying that establishmentarianism is the original confessional position? Is that right?
Yeah. 1646 confession establishes the church as the national church, but then in 1788 they took that out in America.
With the Constitution, right?
Yeah, 1788, that was a year before the United States Constitution.
So the 1788 revision changed the establishmentarianism in the confession. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the next point?
So the next one Carlos has is enforcement of both tables of the law. So Covenanters would say that idolatry, blasphemy, heresy, Sabbath breaking, those are all enforceable by the civil magistrate. Some Reconstructionists would differ on some of those, but the consistent theme is that at least somewhere in the first table they would differ on how harsh it should be enforced. So, like a lot of Reconstructionists don't agree with images of Christ being an idol, or they wouldn't agree with enforcing the Sabbath. Mostly idolatry and heresy they would probably agree with enforcing that.
Yeah, I think the difference too comes from Rushdoony himself, because Rushdoony was not a Sabbatarian in the confessional sense. I'm not sure where he stood on images of Christ, but I can't remember which book it was of Bahnsen, but one of Bahnsen's books had an image of Christ on the front cover, and so it was like, whoa, okay, that's weird. So I'm not sure if that was just an oversight or ignorance, or I'm not sure what it was, but so I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and then there's some people today who are Reconstructionists, but they're even less confessional than Rushdoony and North are. So, like, they kind of totally redefine what Sabbath means. They make it like some libertarian economic concept instead of a spiritual concept.
I remember reading North criticizing what he considered strict Sabbatarianism, which, as far as I'm aware, is just Sabbatarianism.
Yeah, exactly. They try to redefine what it is to sound...
So, like, he would say that he believes that Sunday, the first day of the week, is the Lord's Day, the day that we go to church, etc. But when it comes to the confession says to cease worldly employment and recreation, or something to that effect, and he would differ on that and say that, well, it's fine to work as long as you're still making it to church or something, and then with as far as recreation. And his argument was something about, like, he said something to the effect that you can't be consistent unless you shut off the lights or something like that. I don't remember the exact argument, but something to that effect.
I mean, you always get people who say, well, you can't go out to eat because you're helping other people sin. Yeah, but then the people take it further and say, well, then you can't use electricity, you can't use anything that that has to be supported by other people. So what do you guys have to say about that? Like, where do you draw the line?
Well, in the confession, it just says that works of mercy and necessity are acceptable on the Sabbath, and that's directly from all of Jesus' interactions with the Pharisees about the Sabbath. They took it to a very strict, above the law kind of way. Like, they would have bizarre things like, you can only travel a certain distance from your house. So to get around that, they would take like some pots and pans and leave them on the road so that they would be a certain distance from those possessions of theirs, and it would be okay somehow. And just weird things like that.
And like Jesus and his disciples, who were essentially homeless, were grabbing some grains from the corner of somebody's field, which was standard practice for contributing to the poor. And they said, because you're grinding, because you're getting the grains out of the husks or whatever, that's work, and you can't do that. But it's an act of necessity because you need to eat.
So we would say culturally, because of our society, we need electricity to cook food and have air conditioning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's an act of mercy too. Like if you're having people over to your house in the afternoon, it's an act of mercy to make them a meal, and you can't really do that without electricity for the most part. And the same thing with, hospitals. If somebody gets seriously injured and has to go to the hospital can't run its equipment without electricity.
So a doctor working on Sunday or a nurse or something.
Yeah, probably not in every situation, like having some office open or something, but definitely, in emergency rooms or...
So plastic surgeons shouldn't be working on Sunday.
Yeah, stuff like that. But
I really need my nose job, Paul.
Cool. Next point.
We went over national covenanting, establishment principle, enforcement of both tables, and then the regulative principle of worship. That kind of fits into the last point. Covenanters are a strict regulative principle, which that's kind of there's no need to put the word strict in front of regulative principle, because...
It's either regulative or normative. There's no middle ground.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of people have redefined what that means, too. They'll say... John Frame's the biggest guy that's redefined what regulative principle of worship is. They basically redefine it to mean normative principle. So the regulative principle is where you can only do what's expressly told you to do for public worship and family worship. If the Bible doesn't say whether or not you can do it, that means you can't do it. And then the normative principle is that basically the Bible is guidelines for worship. You can do something that's...
As long as it's not forbidden.
As long as it's not forbidden.
So where does that come from in the confession and in Scripture?
So in Scripture, when Nadab and Abihu, the biggest passage is when Nadab and Abihu, they were supposed to light their little lamps. They were supposed to light them a certain way, and it says that they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord. So basically it was just that they did something that God didn't tell them to do. Not that he told them not to do it, it's that he just didn't say to do it the way that they did it. So then God killed them right there on the spot. So that's the main point where the regulative principle comes from. And being, Presbyterian and covenantal, we don't believe that the New Testament has different standards for worship, even if the elements of worship were explicitly changed by the New Testament. But the principle of the regulative principle doesn't change.
So how would that differ from the less confessional Reconstructionists?
Well, things like exclusive psalmody and no instruments and not practicing holidays that aren't in the Bible, they wouldn't have a problem with any of those things, with singing modern hymns or songs and with using instruments or with celebrating Christmas or Easter, for example. But the Covenanters would take, and there's in-depth arguments for each of these things that are very convincing. Even though it sounds very bizarre, I remember the first time I ever heard that Christmas was bad, I thought that was insane.
You're like, we're celebrating Jesus' birth. Why is that bad?
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out what I think about that and how I am going to run my family according to that. So I'm definitely not the best person to advance that type of position.
As far as the worship goes, or during a service in music, is exclusive psalmody, is that part of the regulative principle, or are some people regulative principle without exclusive psalmody?
They say they are, but they're not.
So they're together, right?
Yeah, because the Bible tells you to sing psalms, but it doesn't tell you to sing that you can write your own songs.
So in order for non-exclusive psalmody to be regulative, has to be a command for man-made songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Or instrumental accompaniment.
Mm-hmm. And the instruments were part of the Old Testament temple worship, which was abrogated in Christ in the ceremonial law, so there's no reason to have those, and there's no explicit command to have them in New Testament worship, so that's the main argument.
Is that the same sort of thing with the Song of Moses and other Old Testament songs that weren't in the Psalter?
Yeah, those are...
Or were they extraordinary circumstance, sort of?
Yeah, it was just like a one-time thing. It wasn't meant to be, they weren't included in the Psalter by the Holy Spirit. They were obviously inspired songs because it's written in the Bible, but it wasn't, it was meant to be sang at that time, not meant to be sang at all times.
Yeah, singing actually wasn't implemented in Israel's worship until the time of David. I forget the reference, but somewhere in, I believe it's in Chronicles, he actually institutes singing and instrument playing and all that stuff. And basically the whole order of worship has changed quite drastically from what it was in the time of Moses.
What was the purpose of that change, does it say?
Well, I believe it had to do with, moving away from the tabernacle
into the temple,
preparing for the temple.
I'm fairly new to regulative principle, so I'm definitely not the best person to ask about these types of things. I'm still learning myself. I agree with exclusive psalmody, but I definitely couldn't debate someone about it. Like at my church, we'll sing like one psalm or two maybe, and those are the only ones I sing. But we have the 1650 Psalter at home that we sing for family worship, and my kids love it.
Do you stay sitting down then when they sing other songs, or do you still stand just to try to not differentiate yourself too much? Or
I stand just because I'm not like protesting, so I'm not gonna sit, but I'm not participating either.
What's the title of the 1650?
The Psalms of David in meter.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll put a link to that in our description for people.
There's an entire website that one of our mutual friends made, but It's all about the 1650 Psalter and the translation. It's actually more accurate than the King James Version.
Oh, that's fascinating. Even though it's in meter.
Yeah.
What's that website? Shaney, is that the one that you shared with me the other day?
I don't think so.
We'll have to look that up and figure out who it is.
I think it's like this 1650 Psalter or something like that.
Yeah, 1650psalter.com. It's got all sorts of information on there. There's some other articles and stuff like that I can dig up that talk about how it was translated and the history of it. I think the Westminster Assembly had something to do with it. Or maybe it was the Scottish General Assembly.
Oh, real quick, I had one question. I'm sure anyone who has, I mean, you're not a huge, studied up on the regulative principle, but I'm sure you've heard people say the Colossians 3:16, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. Guarantee there's a easy response to that, right? What do you guys usually say when people say that to you?
Yeah, they think it means psalms as in the Psalms, and then hymns as in Isaac Watts hymns, and then spiritual songs as in Chris Tomlin. But clearly that's not the original meaning.
Right.
And then it's also funny because the same people who say that, they don't sing 33% psalms, they sing 0 psalms.
Exactly.
So that just annoys me. But in the original language, those refer to the types of songs that are in the Psalter. They're not talking about uninspired songs that would be written, in the 1700s or whatever.
So psalms, hymns, songs of the Spirit, kind of like all describing the same thing, just different types of them or something, but they're all referring to the same thing.
Let me put it in my words, and you can kind of clarify if I misunderstand. We think of the Book of Psalms as being titled Psalms, but that was the Septuagint title, whereas the Hebrew title was like Songs of Praise or something to that effect. But the terms used to describe the Psalter itself were psalms, hymns, songs, and wisdom, or something like that.
Yeah.
And those terms are all used. So individually, those terms could be used to describe any song, but when you use all of them together, it's kind of like saying commandments, laws, statutes, or something like that.
Yeah.
A pleonasm, or is that what it's called? Pleonasm, where it's like use the same different terms to refer to the same thing in order to be redundant, just to clarify, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I don't remember the term, but yeah. Yeah, R. Scott Clark has a lot of good material. Actually, I read his book, Recovering the Reformed Confession, and that one of my RPCNA friends back home in Las Vegas gave me. That was pretty convincing. Actually, in that book, he argued for just singing scripture, not just the Psalms. But then I heard that he changed his position after he wrote that book, and now he's exclusive Psalm.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Is he URC?
Yeah, he's Continental Reformed.
Okay, that's what I thought he was. I thought he has Heidelblog, I think is his.
Yep.
So he's original. And that's the fascinating thing about that. So the Heidelberg Catechism, Belgic Confession, and Synod of Dort, or Canons of Dort, that's what they call the three forms of unity, which is the Continental Reformed, also known as Dutch Reformed or German Reformed, depending on who you're talking to. That's just another Reformed tradition other than the Westminster Confession. So it's a little bit earlier. The Westminster Confession is a little more specific in certain areas. But I have a friend, I didn't realize this. I have a friend who's like in Holland, who goes to a traditional Dutch Reformed church in Holland, and they are like head coverings, sing only psalms. Like you would think that they were You would think they were Presbyterian because of like all of their practices. And I was talking to this guy from the church, and he just goes to the church because it's the only Reformed church in town. And he's asking me about exclusive psalmody because his church practices it. And I'm like, my church doesn't practice it. I have no idea. So it's interesting that was actually a continental tradition.
Yeah, actually the Scottish and, the UK Reformed people used the three forms of unity before they wrote the Westminster standards. So
Right. So they agreed with them as well.
yeah, and a lot of them were at the Synod of Dort too, that was actually the largest Reformed council in the history of ever, and that's where they, declared Arminianism a heresy, and that's where the 5 points of Calvinism come from. So if you read the Canons of Dort, there's 5 points, and they're the 5 points of Calvinism.
Cool. All right. Next point.
So yeah, he basically just says generally Covenanters are historicist postmillennials, and then Reconstructionists are usually partial preterist postmillennial. So, and that, again, these are just very general. There's going to be differences within each camp,
Yeah. I'm in the middle because I'm idealist, so.
Yeah.
Do you want to briefly just describe anyone, just real quickly, what the difference between those three?
So partial preterist would look at the Book of Revelation. This would be like Gary DeMar's position, Kenneth Gentry's position, Greg Bonson's position, to one extent or another, would look at the Book of Revelation and say that the majority of the events in the Book of Revelation from essentially chapters 4 to 19 have already occurred, either in the events surrounding the destruction of Jerusalem or in some sense also, like Bonson would take a little bit older view and say that some of the events in Revelation also pertain to the fall of Rome. In a general sense, you look at the events in Revelation and in New Testament prophecy as having already occurred in the past. And that's what preterist means.
A historicist eschatology is going to see the Book of Revelation as prophesying particular historical events spanning throughout the entire interadvental period, basically. I'm not an expert on the Book of Revelation by any means, especially not from this understanding, but that's the general sense of it. So the same way that Jonathan Edwards explains in A History of the Work of Redemption that from Adam to Christ, we have, all of that history covered either by divinely inspired history or by prophecy. So what's not covered by history, by Chronicles and Kings and so on, we have it, the major events foretold in the prophecies of Daniel, mostly, and also Ezekiel and the other prophets as well. And then we have it complemented by profane historians, non-inspired historians that we can that we can see the fulfillments. So basically, historicists is going to see the Book of Revelation as doing the same thing as Daniel, as filling in the gaps from what we have covered it, divinely inspired history in the Gospels and in Acts, and then the rest we have covered in prophecy in the Book of Revelation.
So then the Book of Revelation would be, in some sense, a timeline of major historical events concerning the church from the first to the second advent. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the biggest difference between preterists and historicists would be that preterists would say we're already in the millennium is the entire inner advent period, the progress of the gospel continues, versus historicists would say the millennium is the future era of peace following the destruction of Islam and the Roman Catholic Church.
Right.
Well, I'm kind of somewhere in between. I agree with the historicist that Revelation is speaking of events from the first to second advent, but I just see parallels within the book itself that point to more recapitulations than a historicist. So some historicists, I think, see a recapitulation around Revelation chapter 12. Some don't. I see like 7 recapitulations. And the only reason for that is just there's nothing in the text that says, and now we're going to go back to the beginning and start over again. But I think that there are textual clues that that's actually what's happening. So not a major disagreement, but because then you see the visions are spanning larger periods of time, then the events are less specific is really the biggest difference. I actually tend to agree with historicists on a lot of things. I was reading some Owen, and I was like, yeah, preach it, brother. So...
All right, so the next one is two-kingdom theology. The Covenanters believe in 2 kingdoms usually, and the Reconstructionists are more along the lines of Abraham Kuyper, who sort of taught there is basically one kingdom and that contains everything.
Can you kind of flesh out what the two kingdom view means?
Yeah. In the Westminster Confession, it has two kingdoms, basically the kingdom of grace and the kingdom of power. These aren't completely separate in the sense that there's a different law ruling them. They're just different ways, you can think of it in different ways that Christ rules over different things. So the kingdom of grace is his special rule over the church. And then his kingdom of power that's his rule as the Son of God over all providence. So every little thing that happens, everything that comes to pass, that's in Christ's kingdom of power. And he uses his kingdom of power to bring people into the kingdom of grace now that he's been given the nations as his heritage, basically. The kingdom of grace is the visible church, not the invisible church. It includes people. Some people nowadays try to make it out to be that the kingdom of grace is just the invisible church and the spiritual things that go on, but it's also the visible church. So that includes elders, presbyteries, synods, the means of grace, the regulative principle.
Whereas the kingdom of power is basically everything that's happening.
Yeah, that's just his rule over providence as the eternal Son of God. So, but there's two views in the traditional Reformed camp, and I wrote an article about this, but I tried to stay in the middle the whole time because I'm not sure what I think, and people that I really respect are on both sides. But regarding the kingdom of power, everyone agrees with the kingdom of grace, that it's his special rule. And so this is where you get the difference between sacred and secular. Some people they downplay the difference between sacred and secular. And so that will kind of mess up your view of the two kingdoms. Regarding the kingdom of power, how the dispute within confessional Reformed theology is that whether Christ rules the kingdom of power as the eternal Son of God or also as the mediator. So not in the sense that him as mediator, that he acts as a mediator for everything in the kingdom of power,
but that it's part of his appointed reign as opposed to his reign by nature of being God? Or am I not understanding that?
Yeah, I'm not going to claim that I am an expert either. A lot of the older writers, like Gillespie and Rutherford and the Westminster Divines, were hesitant to speak of Christ's mediatorial reign as being over the kingdom of power. They thought his mediatorial reign was only over the church. And the reason that they were hesitant to say that was because they were battling Erastianism at that time. And Erastianism is the view that the state can control the church. And so if you believe that Christ's mediatorial reign is over his kingdom of power, the civil magistrate is also in the kingdom of power. He's not part of the church as an office, even though he may be a Christian and a member of the church. So the Erastians wanted to make Christ as mediator over the kingdom of power, so that would mean that they would kind of twist it to mean that he
by his kingdom of power controls the kingdom of grace instead of runs alongside, or I don't know. I'm trying to put it in my own words.
Because they wanted to try to find some way of like the divine right of kings. They were trying to defend that, and they were trying to defend the idea that the king could rule over the church and tell the church what to do. And that's clearly not scriptural, and the reformers, fought and died against that.
So while establishmentarianism would say that there is an official religion, the institution of the church is jurisdictionally still separate from the state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of a fine distinction, especially if you're not familiar with it. Like the confession says that the civil magistrate can call synods and councils, but he's not the one that makes judgments at them.
He doesn't hold the keys of the kingdom.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So the confession is very careful to say that he may not assume to himself the administration of the word or sacraments or the power of the keys to the kingdom of heaven, but it's still his authority and his duty to make sure that unity and peace is preserved in the church, that the truth of God be kept pure and entire, that all blasphemies and heresies be suppressed, and all corruptions and abuses in worship and discipline prevented or reformed, and all the ordinances of God duly settled, administered, and observed.
So it's not exactly that the state is controlling the church, but that the state is enforcing what the church has been established as. So the church kind of has decided at this point in time what is proper worship and improper worship, and the state assists the church in maintaining that, as opposed to telling them what to do.
Yeah. And then even if the church went astray and was teaching heresy, he could come in and punish them for that. It's kind of a checks and balance thing. Even if the church is apostate, he still has a power to punish that. So then the newer confessional Reformed guys like William Symington and the 17 and 1800s guys, they had no problem saying that the mediatorial dominion of Christ was over the kingdom of power. And that by that they weren't trying to say that, such as Christ's power over demons, like Satan has to, in Job, ask permission from God to do anything. That doesn't mean that he's a mediator to the demons and saves them,
It just means that he's in control.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very nuanced, and I'm definitely not an expert on it, but there is a slight difference of, sometimes it seems semantic, like they're saying the same thing, but they're just
using different
trying
words.
to be careful not to let people at the time that they were fighting against to have any ground.
Whereas Abraham Kuyper, so compared to, in contrast to the two kingdom model, Abraham Kuyper said, no, it's all one reign of Christ. There's no distinction between how he rules the church and how he rules everything else.
Yeah, so he would emphasize, whether you eat or drink and everything you do, glorify God.
So he would look at that and say, regulative principle doesn't work because would he see that as a change, or?
Yeah, I think this definitely affects your view of. So all these 7 things affect each other. They feed back on each other, and definitely two kingdom theology. You can see how that would affect the regulative principle.
The regulative principle applies to worship, not worldly employ, recreation.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
The office of the civil magistrate, for example, that's built into natural law. Just the created order that God made with families. When multiple families get together and form societies, naturally you're going to have people with hierarchy and authority over groups of people.
When you say natural law, the former uninformed theonomist in me would say, but God's law is better than natural law, or something. What is when you say natural law, what are you talking about?
So that same with me. I kind of never liked that word, but that's because people have completely destroyed it, the concept in our day. But natural law is no different than biblical law, than God's law written in Scripture. Natural law is the character of God written in creation and on man's heart, and it's also what's called the secondary laws of nature, which is what is right because of the way God chose to make the world.
So not by his character itself, but by consequence of how he's created?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, and that would be where civil government comes from. It's not like...
There wouldn't be a need for civil government necessarily if there had been no fall, but because there was a fall and he decreed the fall, therefore we need punishment of evil, etc.
There would still be hierarchy, Yeah. Adam was still head over his wife.
But as far as the need for using the sword to punish wickedness.
Yeah, there would be no need for punishing sin at all, but there'd still be hierarchy in creation.
So natural law would be like Romans 1, where although they knew God, they refused to honor him. So this is like what's natural, it's intuitive to human beings, what is right and wrong, but we refuse to do it anyway.
Yeah, we suppress it. So just a lot of times people argue that you have no idea what natural law is, and in a sense, they're right because we suppress the truth, you know? But then Romans 2 says that the Gentiles
do by nature what is according to the law. They are a law to themselves.
So everyone's got a conscience that God put in them, so they know God's requirements and they know that the punishment for breaking it is hell.
So when it says they have no excuse, it literally means they can't say, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that concept make covenanter theonomy different from reconstructionist theonomy? What's the main difference in that regard?
It's hard to make a blanket statement just because there could be a lot of different people who hold the different nuances of things, but just to make a general statement, it seems like Reconstructionists believe that there has to be some case law explicitly in Scripture about something, or else the magistrate can't do it at all. And Covenanters would say that there's something called proper law, which is... So I wrote 2 blogs on proper law, which is basically the civil law. There's actually 3 types of civil laws. There's some that are inherently moral, and then there's some that are kind of a mix of general equity, which means that it's inherently moral and it's general for all people, not just particular to Israel. So there's 3. There's some that are inherently moral, some that have some moral parts to it, but that there's also parts to it that are particular to Israel. And then there's some civil laws that are only particular to Israel. And so that 3-part distinction comes from where I learned that from is from Johannes Piscator's book, Disputations on the Judicial Laws of Moses. And then also in the appendix to that, I forgot who, but like a Westminster divine or someone quoted him and elaborated on that some more. And it's in the appendix to that. Particular equity was something that was that only Israel, it was only meant for Israel to do. So like levirate marriage or the laws about the land. So like how they divided up the land of Israel for the 12 tribes, stuff like that doesn't apply to anybody but them. Those are expired. The Westminster Confession says that that's expired with the state of Israel, except for the general equity of the civil law. So things that are general equity, one way of knowing if something, Turretin has 3 reasons to know if something's general equity or not. And one of the reasons Turretin gives is if pagan nations, through their understanding of natural law, ever tried to enforce something that's in the Bible.
If a nation completely apart from the gospel and the law of God does something that is by nature according to the law of God, then we know that that is something that's common to nations as opposed to particular to Israel.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously as long as it's a righteous thing.
Right.
I wrote an entire blog about several examples from Scripture about pagan kings enforcing the first table of the law through their understanding of natural law. So they helped Israel rebuild the temple. They didn't allow people to blaspheme God. The God of Israel, too, not just some generic one of their pagan deities. But even just the fact that every nation in the history of the world always has blasphemy and heresy concepts, even if they're wrong about what
they are.
Consists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just the fact that they know that that's something that should be punished. The divines and reformers would see that as proof that blasphemy and heresy should be suppressed by the magistrate. Seems bizarre to Americans, but that's how they thought. So
natural law helps inform us as to what aspects of the Mosaic law are common to all nations as opposed to particular to Israel.
Yes, exactly. Okay. That was one of Turretin's points.
And how would that differ from people like Van Drinnen and Horton and folks who are talking about 2 kingdoms in a way that makes it seem a little bit contrary to the theonomic thesis?
I have not read very much of them on 2 kingdoms or on natural law, but my understanding is that they would try to kind of divorce natural law from biblical law. I'm not totally sure, actually. I have not studied them very much, and even in my blog post about it, I didn't even address them at all because I didn't know enough. I just wanted to make a positive case for what 2 kingdoms is in the confession.
From my understanding, just from what little interaction I've had, it seems to me that two kingdoms is used as a form of rhetoric against theonomy and postmillennialism. At least that's how Van Drinnen presents it.
Yeah.
But what you're telling me, it seems like you're saying that the Westminster divines, when they were writing about this in the Confession, they didn't see any contention between the two kingdom natural law sort of understanding and the theonomic understanding of the civil magistrate.
Yeah, exactly. I do know that they believe that the R2K position, that it's slightly different. They don't think of it as the kingdom of power and the kingdom of grace. They think of it more as church versus state, kind of. Okay. So that's a completely different concept than...
Which it seems like the way that you describe two kingdoms to me, it seems like that could be an easy misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, because Christ in his providence is controlling the state, but in specificity ruling over the church. I can at least see how that kind of misunderstanding.
Yeah, and especially when they read, people like Gillespie in his book Aaron's Rod Blossoming, where the whole time he's just arguing against Erastianism. Right. And to them, that's kind of, it's easy to misread that.
To think that it's arguing against the civil magistrate being Christian?
Yeah, or something.
It's interesting. In particular, it's interesting because Gillespie also, in his Wholesome Severity, argues very strongly for the perpetuity of punishments, of penology. Mm-hmm. All right. Did we miss any of the points of the seven?
The last one's political dissent.
Ah, yes. So, we did talk about that a little bit a couple episodes ago.
So Reconstructionists would basically, they don't have a problem using the political system that we have now to bring about what they consider a biblical form of government. But then Covenanters, their methods would be different. They don't agree with cooperating with the establishment that we have now because it's a ungodly government, because the First Amendment
and the Supremacy Clause.
So Covenanters wouldn't vote or run for political office or join the military, but a Reconstructionist wouldn't have a problem voting or running for office. Okay. Those are the basics of it. That can get pretty nuanced too, so.
Okay. So the biggest difference in that regard would be Reconstructionists would say, yeah, the way that the government is now is not a good idea, but we'll fix it from the ground up. We'll work with the way that it is now and try to change it. Whereas the Covenanters would say, no, working with it would be sinful. Yeah. And what are there any books that you have read that kind of helped you along understanding these different things?
I liked Brian Schwartley has a book about national covenanting. Okay. That's really good. And then mostly I've been buying a lot of older books from Reformation heritage, from Gillespie and Rutherford and some other Puritans that talk about church government and also how that relates to the civil government. And I'm not even close to had enough time to read all that I want to read, of course, But there's also a lot of books on like digitalpuritan.net that I've downloaded. I'm writing a blog series on contraception right now, and I've been referring to William Gouge, who is a Westminster divine who wrote a book of domestical duties. So I've been referring to that book a lot. There's a ton of free books online, even if they're just scans of really old copies, they're still legible. That I've been trying to read what people thought back then in their own words instead of what modern people say they meant. Yeah.
I've been doing that too, actually. And for those of you who are unaware, if you find old scans and you want to convert them into something that's actually like a readable PDF, like into actual text, there is something called OCR software. Google Documents will do it about 10 or so pages at a time. Or you can you can actually purchase something that does it a little bit quicker. But it takes something that's a picture of words, like somebody took a picture of like a book page, and it turns it into a text document so that it's searchable like a PDF, or you can convert it into something that that reading software will actually be able to recognize.
There's actually an app for that.
For OCR?
It's called Office Lens.
Office Lens? How much is that app?
It's free.
Sweet. I will look into that.
Yeah, so you just take a take a picture with your phone of a book, of a page of a book, and then it lets you copy the text straight from it. It won't, I don't think it'll make it like a PDF, but it'll let you copy the text.
How many pages does it do at a time?
It's just one.
Okay, yeah. So, see, Google Docs does the same type of thing. So if you find a scan of a book and you import it into Google Docs, you can actually import it as where it actually imports it with the text reference. But it only will do it, but it will only do it like 10 or so pages at a time. So it'll actually download the whole book, but you can only look at the actual text like 10 pages at a time. So if you had like a 600-page book, it would take you a while to like copy paste all of the stuff, but you would be able to do it. So I did that with like Hengstenberg's Christology of the Old Testament. The first volume is the only one that I've actually converted, and when you do stuff like that, you've always got the issue of it misrecognizing marks on the page as letters and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's easy enough to figure out when you're looking through it that, oh, that circumflex is actually not supposed to be there. That was just a mark on the page or something. But that's the cool thing that I found about old books is that most of them are not copyrighted anymore, so you can find them for free. So even if you can't find like it in print, you can find PDFs or scans of old books, which has been cool.
We've got a lot of those linked on reformedtheonomy.wordpress.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to plug your blog majorly. One other thing that Dustin actually he wanted us to make sure that we plug is your wife makes beard oil.
Oh, yeah.
Explain, because my beard is feeling a little dry. I don't know what I should do.
Yeah, well, when I started growing a beard, I learned about beard oil, that you put beard oil in it to moisturize it and keep it smelling nice, and so you can style it and stuff like that, keep it from getting frizzy. I don't think I have ever purchased like an actual beard oil. She always had essential oils and different, like almond oil and all sorts of oils around. So she just researched how to make one, and she made me a bottle. Well, the first scent, it was like pine and cedar wood, and then another, foresty smell. And it smelled really good, and so we thought, hey, maybe we could. So she bought other scents and was experimenting with them, and then we thought maybe we could sell these. We're not trying to, make a huge business out of it, but it's just fun. So
cool. Does she have a website, or where can people get a hold of that?
We have a Facebook page and an Etsy page.
Okay.
Barth Beard Oil. And Barth actually means beard in German. So it's pretty cool. The coat of arms has a dude with a big fat beard on it. So
So your name literally means Paul Beard.
Yeah.
And you have a giant beard on your face.
Yeah. My dad, my grandpa, my uncles, they all have mustaches, but not beards. So my grandpa's got a very iconic mustache. It's a handlebar, huge curly mustache.
But to neglect the beard, that almost seems like Barth blasphemy.
Yeah. So yeah, we started making. She made it all pretty much. She put it on me. So I was
You were the experiment.
The model. Yeah.
Cool.
So we've got, how many scents? We've got 3 scents, I think. Gentleman is one of them. And I don't think I could even describe what they smell like. You'd have to read the descriptions on the website.
You just smell dapper when you wear this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Gentleman, you smell like James Bond, even though I've never smelled James Bond. That's what he would smell like if he had a beard. But he doesn't have a beard, so he's not as cool as you would be if you wore Gentleman.
That's
and
funny.
Then there's another one, a juniper scent that smells like juniper, and I think it has some other foresty scents in it. So it's very refreshing and a little bit of fruity smelling. I think it's got like grapefruit smell in it.
Nice.
And then the other one we have is just like the general pine cedar smell. So
no matter which way you go, you're going to be some sort of manly.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're a woman with a beard, not really.
No, yeah, unless you want to smell like a lumberjack.
Cool.
So,
Well,
yeah.
Tell us how we can get connected with you. So you run Presbyterian Memes page on Facebook, and Presby Memes is the name of the Twitter handle?
Yes.
Okay, with a Y, Presby memes?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then your blog, again, is?
reformedtheonomy.wordpress.com.
Okay. And how else can we get connected with you? Are we allowed to send you a friend request on Facebook? Or?
Yeah. I add you, but the first time somebody says something wrong, I delete them. So,
so I'm treading on thin ice right now. Is that what this is all about?
Yeah.
So this conversation that we're having, this was a test of friendship to see if I can still be your friend on Facebook.
Yeah.
Speaking of memes, Dustin wants to put a few up as like, sort of a preview of all of your artistry. What are your favorite ones?
Well, Brandon made that one. Dude, all the memes one meme I altered. It was a Roman Catholic meme that said, it showed four pictures, a Hindu, a Buddhist, and a Muslim, and then a Roman Catholic person, and they all had funny hats on, and it said, Buddhism, funny hat, and then under it had a checkbox that had bacon, but it wasn't checked. And they all said that except Christianity, and it said bacon and funny hat. So all I did to that was change the picture of the Roman Catholic cardinal or whatever to a picture of John Calvin, and then I reposted it, and then it went viral. Then the only other one that went insanely viral was the one that Brandon made last week of the inspirational quote calendar that said, those Christian cheesy calendars that are inspirational Bible quotes or whatever.
Yeah.
But this one had the verse where Satan is tempting Jesus and he says, I'll give you I forgot exactly what it said, I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world or something like that.
If you bow down and worship me.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And it's the person whoever made that clearly did not know
what the Bible said.
The context of that verse.
Or the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
What, Shani?
That's so funny, because Colin, remember when I was in California and we met up?
Yeah.
Actually, at that conference, one of the speakers, Abner Chow, he actually made a joke about that, Luke 4:4, quoting out of context, and how
really
Abner Chow has a really good sense of humor. He's a funny guy. So he made the same joke.
Yeah, and it literally, I can't even remember how many shares it got, but it was a lot. And then Catholic Memes shared it, I think, and then every memes page, posted it after Presbyterian Memes did. And Catholic Memes has thousands of followers, a lot. And our shares were more than theirs, so that's pretty cool.
Wow, look at you.
Yeah.
You mean Antichrist memes?
Yeah, Antichrist memes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cool. Well, Paul, just thank you so much for coming on and just talking to us about your stuff and, educating us on some differences here and there. We will be sure we're going to include links to all of the different stuff that we talked about in the description of the episode, so be sure to check that out. Shane, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Nope.
Well, thanks guys for listening. This is Dat Postmill. You can find us at datpostmill.com. You can find us on Facebook, Dat Postmill. On Facebook, it's 2 words, Dat Postmill, but still 1 L in Postmill. You can find us on Twitter at Dat Postmill, and just keep hashtagging Dat Postmill.
I like that. Hey, Knox, I ain't know what you was doing, man, when you was doing all this, but another one. Let's go. Walk, talk, eat, drink, sleep, dream. Gospel. Wake, pray, read, dress, work, think. Gospel. Rest, fellowship, yes, church, hear, see. Gospel. Everything. Gospel. Everywhere. Everywhere.